Hey there, this is Pete Townsend from Norio Ventures, and welcome to Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at what makes them do what they do. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is kindly sponsored by Ireland's fintech and financial services recruitment specialists, Top Tier Recruitment. If you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with the team at Top Tier Recruitment. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com and tell them we sent you. This week, we're doing another Money Talk segment with friend of the show and sponsor Paul Smyth from Top Tier Recruitment and Possible.ie. We're looking at the right here, right now, this week, with the world on fire with coronavirus and how that's impacting business across startups, VCs, funding, hiring, coaching, corporates, and new ideas. This episode is also featured on Top Tier Recruitment's podcast, Your Pursuit of Happiness, so check that out on your favorite podcast platform as well. Loads of great insights from that crew. With that, let's just buckle right up and step on the gas for this week's episode of
Money Never Sleeps, pal!
Yeah, that's my kids, folks.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Pete Townsend, great to have you back on the show again.
Awesome to be here, Paul.
We thought it'd be a good idea, given everything that's going on with coronavirus, if you've heard of it,
Yeah, I have a little bit.
to get you on to have a bit of a chat through kind of what you're seeing, where you think the opportunities are, the challenges are, and give people a bit of advice around that. And similar on our side, obviously, you know, recruitment has been majorly disrupted. Coaching is a little bit different. But thought it was a good idea. You know, we're working in similar spaces in terms of fintech, blockchain, financial services to have a chat through and see where things are.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. So strange times. We're in the second week of kind of a formal lockdown, I suppose. All happened very, very quickly. Myself and Laura and the guys ended up going home and working from home from March 9th. So I think we're in our fourth week of working from home, back at the kitchen table. Took a decision early because no point taking a risk when we can just pick up laptops and go. And lucky, I think, to be in that position. But things have moved very, very quickly. You know, it's new updates, new restrictions nearly every day, it seems. But within all of this, there has to be opportunities. What are you seeing?
Yeah, there are. I mean, you know, me personally, at least, I set up for this 5 years ago. I knew it was coming, right? My wife and I got the house remodeled back in 2015, got an extension built. We took the playroom, and that playroom became my office. I didn't leave the corporate world until a year later, but I'm glad I did that. And then over time, I've just kind of adjusted over the last year, especially doing meetings in town, probably just 2, maybe max 3 days a week, but trying to get as much work done as I could from my home office, which nicely has turned into a bit of a recording studio as well, because I've got this long fabric blind that pulls down over the window that acts as a sound absorber, which is great. So I kind of feel like with all of this, if, you know, from even starting from that work from home opportunity, if you want to call it that, right, that you need to have discipline to work from home.
Yeah.
Right. Having kids in school is one thing, right? Having kids at home, well, are you in the right corner of the house? I was talking to Mike Brennan from Finch Capital last week, and he said that, listen, you know, having him at home and his wife at home, both working, they got to take turns trading at the kitchen table, right? And looking after the kids and, you know, managing their day that way and effectively extending their workday so both of them can get through everything, which is hard. Luckily, my wife doesn't work and she's looking after the kids, but it's nice to have the kids around the house as it is anyway. So, you know, that first opportunity of can you actually turn your work from home situation into some sense of normalcy to get stuff done is, you know, is the first challenge as well as being an opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of businesses, particularly in the more traditional financial services space, and a lot of businesses that would have kind of front office operations here have really struggled, I think, with the whole remote work idea over the past few years. And this has kind of forced people to do it because there's no choice, right? So I think the opportunity is there on the employee side as well to prove that remote working and working from home is a valid opportunity or is a valid option, I suppose, when things do come back to some sort of normal. But you need to be able to kind of set up that workspace. You need to be able to, get through things as well. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot actually is, there's two sides to it. So there is the opportunity for employees to kind of really show that work from home is an option. And then there's also the side of employers to see that work from home is an option as well. But to make it work effectively, I think you need kind of trust and responsibility on both sides. And there certainly is a little bit more of a holiday atmosphere out there with some people. And I think it'll really kind of highlight that to employers, in terms of who's taking the piss or not.
Exactly. No, I know.
It's up to everyone. Everyone needs to take responsibility for this.
It's a different mindset, right? It kind of depends on where you are, right? Like I nearly took a job a few years ago with a managed account platform company out of Canada. And when I was doing the interviews with those guys, the main guy said to me, he's like, "Listen, Pete, you sure you want to stop working for a bank?" And I think I've said this on different podcasts before, because when you're working for a bank, you can just go into the corner for a couple of weeks and hide if you don't like what's going on, right? And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm ready for that. And never mind going to work in an asset management and alternative investment management business and not being able to hide in the corner for 2 weeks, but when you're your own business, right? There's no hiding, right?
Yeah. No one's going to do it if you don't.
Exactly. Either do it or don't. So it's this strong inert push that I have in me to keep this momentum going. And I'm seeing this out across the startup community as well. If you take a look at where the typical startup is right now, there is no typical startup. Right? If they were in the midst of a funding round, this just really sucks for them.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from the VC perspective, that's an opportunity for them because the valuations are going to be pretty low. Now, it may not hit immediately, but if you were kind of wrangling and negotiating between, say, giving a VC 15% of your business versus, say, 12% of your business, you know what? Odds are you're probably going to give them 15% right now. Right. Because if you are, depending upon where you are in your value in your own cash flow cycle, where you are in terms of getting customer revenue in the door, you're going to need that cash. But this isn't financial advice. Obviously, I think valuations out there were heady to begin with. Even though we're a few years away from the buzzwords driving valuations, right? And buzzwords of fintech and blockchain and kind of this area where I play. But I still think, if you take those lofty valuations and you take kind of this real life situation that we're in right now with this whole new normal, almost, somewhere in the middle is kind of where we're going to end up. But I mean, what I've learned over the last year, probably 2 years though, is how personal VC can be and how risk appetite is driving these decisions, these normal investment decisions you would have made 2 weeks ago. You're not making them for a number of different reasons, right? One of the other things I'm thinking about is, robo advisors is a term that's just so overused and it's come and gone. But it really does come down to that human decision and where are the opportunities, right? There was a survey in 2018 done in London. I think it was the City of London, one of the financial and industry bodies that did it, that said most high net worth individuals, they still want to talk to somebody. However, we've seen businesses like Scalable Capital, we've seen businesses like Wealthfront and Betterment in the US do really well just on this basis. If you think about the context of that, where is the money really going to move the robo-advisor market? It's really going to move the high net worth individuals, right? Those with 10, 15, 20, 30 million to invest or more that are investing through a financial advisor right now, a wealth manager, a family office. How has their inability to get that comfort blanket from a face-to-face meeting with a financial advisor changed how they're thinking about investing? That is a reality of what we're going through right now. My own financial advisor says, Pete, do not look at your account right now at all, please.
Well, what is it? Time in the market is more important.
So stay in there,
But the point you make around things changing, it's really true. And if I think of kind of real life examples, even outside of pure fintech or pure financial services. Think about my parents. So they would have done a little bit of shopping online if they're buying, I don't know, bed clothes or something like that, where you don't need to try it on, you don't need to see it if it's food or whatever. So they've now gone pretty much online, and they're using, I think it's O'Brien's for the wine, which was number one on the list.
Yeah.
And they're using a butcher who I think is based down in Clonmel, who's delivering up to Dublin. So they moved away from the large multiples because they couldn't get delivery slots in time. So I'm doing the kind of fruit and veg or milk and all that kind of stuff for them. But they'll stick with those people as well because they were able to kind of give them what they needed during a crisis. Then I was down shopping the other day. I used contactless payment for, I think it was like €45. So contactless payment is becoming more and more popular. And the move to online, where people wouldn't have used online previously, is becoming more and more popular. There has to be kind of a knock-on effect there for the kind of payments industry as well. And the other kind of big change that we've had to think about is what do customers need from us right now? And I think if you're sitting there in a business and you're struggling and you're not sure where your next deal is coming from, maybe that's something that you need to think about. What are people actually willing to pay for? And I think there's a good chance that if they're willing to pay for it right now, it's more of a need than a want or a luxury, in a time where people are cutting back big time on everything that is totally unnecessary. So really, really important. And I think the opportunity is there for companies to really analyze what they're doing with a very kind of lean lens, I suppose,
Totally.
in terms of value add, value enabling, etc. We all know how that works. And pull out of it, what is your core business? What is it that people are really, really willing to pay for? And take that forward.
That's a difficult one because, if you think about some of these transformational projects that might be underway at the corporate level, right? Some of that is viewed as value add, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, extracurricular stuff, engaging with innovative tech companies that may be able to help us get so much leaner.
Yeah.
Right? That's just what I hope is those things don't go. But you got to imagine that when the executives are making the decisions in the last couple of weeks, they're saying, all right, listen, business as usual, that's it. Anything else gets parked. We just need to keep the lights on.
Yeah, but if you can't, if you're a fintech who is offering a solution that's going to make your business leaner, more cost effective, if you can't really prove that and really demonstrate that in this environment, nothing's going to happen for you. And it's going to force you to really think about, what are you doing? What's my value proposition? What's the business case for a head of risk and compliance onboarding us as a reg tech firm who can save X amount of money, do the job they're doing better and more efficiently. You really need to think about that business case now.
You do. And it takes that, like we were saying, I was saying that, that internal inertia, that internal momentum, and just that, okay, we need to keep moving. We need to keep doing things the right way. Whatever lessons we learned the last 3 or 4 years from this new digital world and how it can improve not only the way we work, but the profits we deliver to shareholders. You just need to keep finding ways to march in that direction. And it's just not easy to do.
Yeah.
I was thinking about as well, Paul, some of the opportunities out there. And this was a chat with Owen Fitzgerald. What we were talking about is what is going to be the thing that people start to realize out of all of this that is a big opportunity, right? I was thinking about the use of Microsoft Teams. Working in the startup environment for the last few years, Slack is just such a normal day-to-day application that kind of that email challenger, right? And say, let's kind of cut our email flow by 90%. Let's just communicate this way across the team. It works with remote. It's wonderful. When I started working with QPQ, I'm an advisor to them a couple of years ago. They were using Teams, and I had been using Slack with all the startups I was working with, and it was like such a step down. Now seeing where it is in the last couple of weeks, because so many more folks are using it, I'm like, wow, Microsoft has really come a long way with Teams very quickly. And who else would besides Microsoft, right? They're massive. They're a giant. If they're going to be able to improve something quickly, it's going to be them. And they're doing a really good job with that. Now, corporates are looking at Teams versus Slack and saying, well, Teams is a Microsoft product. It's already well integrated with everything else I'm using. Let's just start using that. And you get these pop-up phone calls, video calls that are really easy to manage. Meetings you can just kick off from right in the middle of it. Slack is harder to integrate. Slack you're looking at from the perspective of, well, most of the startup community were already using it. And now that Slack is a public company, they are looking at, well, what's going to move the needle in terms of revenues? Smaller bit by bit revenues from startups aren't going to move the needle for them. So I think they got to think about where they're going. But, what are the types of things that you could build on top of the Teams environment? I don't even know if Microsoft is going in this direction. If you think about the way Salesforce were building some of this years ago, so many people using Salesforce as their CRM.
Yep.
And Salesforce said, let's open up the architecture to let people build on top of it. What might you be able to do on top of Teams, right? And I was thinking about just the nature of having all these people working remotely right now, logging in through all these different Wi-Fi networks, mobile networks, the CTO, the head of IT, the head of network for these corporates must be going nuts, pulling their hair out and saying,
how
can I actually control this and keep my cybersecurity engaged?
Yeah.
Is there some type of plug-in to Teams that you can use that actually tracks and monitors these things in real time to say, all right, where are folks? Where is the team? And what is that dashboard of where people are connecting from and where the hotspots, potential red zones that we need to look out for in terms of people's connectivity and the security of those connection points?
Yeah.
That's a big opportunity.
Be a tough job to be a head of cybersecurity, I think, at the minute.
Oh, I don't know. And all these boards of investment funds that over the last few years have been looking for information. What is your cybersecurity policy? How are you doing this? So on and so forth. That's all out the window, right? So those don't be rewritten as well. There's a good entry point for a cybersecurity consultant to come into all these boards to rewrite all their cybersecurity policies, which would be fantastic, right? I actually had a look to see what might I be able to do to commercialize some of this, and I had a look to see what URLs might be available. And the first thing that came to mind was Wofro, right? Work from home, but wofro.com is taken. So there was a few ridiculous ones out there that were similar to that were on sale for like €2,000. I'm like, no. I'm not going to go there. But no, you got to think about these kinds of things, commercially and opportunistically, while balancing that with a real world situation we're in right now of the world being on fire, literally. Right?
Yeah, and what have we seen recently? Coming together by staying apart has been, kind of a hashtag that's been trending. And I suppose something I've seen in the recruitment industry since I started in 2007, where you had to meet everyone, you had to be on the phone all the time. It's all changed in the past few years, and it's all around emails, LinkedIn messages, it's all of that type of thing. But we've seen a big shift back in the past couple of weeks in particular. And I think it all kind of stems from people want to be connected. And people are missing that kind of connection. But there's the opportunity there, just putting pure business aside for a minute, to be able to kind of give something back. So I came across a guy, someone shared something on LinkedIn called Shane Hastings. He's, I think, going into his final year in Galway in a tech bachelor's. So he set up a website called covid19.shanehastings.eu, and he is compiling a whole lot of stats on the coronavirus. But if you go onto the website, he also has a page that's listing all of the free stuff that people are doing and giving away, and has everything from LinkedIn Learning, I think, is now free, to he put up the offering we have for possible.e for the 90 minutes coaching thing. But there's so much there, and there's so much kind of opportunity to give back, especially when so many people are doing kind of so much, and obviously frontline staff and even down to people in retail and everything else are putting themselves, putting their own health at risk to be able to do stuff for other people and keep everything going. There is the opportunity there to actually do something and give back. And I think one of the things that has been a trend, probably ticking up slowly over the years, has been people looking at potential employers and looking at what their kind of corporate social responsibility is. And I do think there is an opportunity there for people to really show that it's not just a couple of pages on the website anymore. It's a genuine thing that companies want to help, companies want to do stuff. So I think it's nearly incumbent on everyone to think about what can you do to help
That's a
people
really
stay
good
connected.
point. That's a
Mm,
really good point. I was talking to someone yesterday who was considering a career change, and someone who I will introduce to you, Paul, that was I was advising him, or not advising, but having a chat and saying, listen, at your level, being pretty experienced in the industry and pretty senior, that if you're thinking about the next kind of company that you want to go work for, think about it from the perspective of the CEO, right? Because as senior as this guy is, you want to make sure that the CEO of this business is someone that you are inspired by, someone
yeah.
that can be motivated by, and that someone that you're not going to get annoyed with if they're taking action that seems to go against your own value system, right?
Mm,
That is when you're, someone that's pretty experienced and looking for your next job. That's a good position to take. If you are one amongst thousands, right? You got to think
mm,
about what is your value system, and mentioning, like you just said, corporate social responsibility. How is this company contributing to its overall global stakeholders, not just its shareholders,
mm,
right? And say, is that in alignment with my own value system? Is that something that is important to me? What about ESG,
yeah.
right? What are they doing? Are they planting trees,
Hmm.
right? All these things can be, make it a little bit more enjoyable to go to work every day,
Mm.
right? Yeah, and I think coming out of this, you're going to see a lot more of those examples of companies that are doing the right thing for society, right? By taking these
Mm.
steps. That's a really interesting point.
In terms of challenges, like we've kind of touched on them a little bit, but there are absolutely businesses out there within what we do, and outside of that, you think of restaurants and pubs and stuff in Ireland gone overnight, and hopefully, the vast majority or all of them will recover. But one thing I'm seeing more on the coaching side, I suppose, is things like overwhelm, and when we all have so much going on anyway. This is just another thing to lump on top. So it's managers getting used to managing remote teams where they've never done it before. It's leaders leading through a real global crisis that we've never seen the likes of before. Like I worked in recruitment in the last recession, and it was horrible. But this is just totally unforeseen and totally unprecedented. So there's all of those kind of new challenges that are coming up, and I think, well, I hope that people will take the time once we get back to normal, whatever normal is going to be,
Yep.
to I suppose appreciate how quickly we've been able to move, and really take stuff from that. Like people do, people talk about resilience training and getting people in to train for resilience, but I think almost everyone has shown a huge amount of resilience in the way we've been able to adapt so quickly to this challenge. But that challenge of I had demand yesterday and then all of a sudden I don't have demand today, it's got to be one of the biggest things that businesses are seeing at the minute.
Absolutely. And just on that coaching point, Paul, I know with your business, possible.ie, and you put out that call on LinkedIn and said, listen,
Yeah.
we're here to help, right? And what are you seeing coming back from, some of the, heads of businesses or executives that you're talking to in terms of how they're feeling about things, whether it be professional or personal? Are there any insights from that to share?
I think everyone's in the same boat in terms of it is a massive challenge at the minute, and people everyone is unique, so people are taking all these challenges in different ways. One of the main things that we're seeing is how do I manage remote teams when I haven't done it before, and a lot of that seems to come down to control. Where people are very used to being in an environment where you're physically connected to someone in terms of they're in the same office, and now they're just not. It's a little bit more tricky, or it almost seems a little bit more tricky to be able to make sure that stuff is happening as it's supposed to. So management styles are having to change. It's not as easy to walk over and say, Pete, where are we on the pitch for XYZ company?
Yeah.
So that's a big challenge, and it's a big kind of mindset shift. So a lot of what I do around that, I suppose, is helping people to see, you used to work like this. What can you do now with the tools that you have available to be able to react and change? A lot of the other stuff we're seeing is around leadership. And people feeling let down by leaders in companies, where they felt that maybe people could have moved a little bit quicker in terms of implementing work from home or remote working policies. People are feeling a little bit lost with that. People are employees in particular are missing that kind of connection, and are struggling with the fact that there isn't someone coming down to their desk to say, where are we on XYZ pitch? So a lot of it is around kind of connection, and a sense of loss of control is a big thing. And they're really the kind of fundamentals that are driving the issues around remote working and getting used to all of this type of stuff. And I think additionally, from a leadership perspective, there's a whole range of different types of leadership, clearly, but you're really seeing now that people are under a massive amount of pressure, and it's how do you cope as a leader with that pressure coming down? Do you take it and channel it and run with it and take what you can from it, or do you pass it on in a negative way to your teams potentially? And that's another big issue that we're seeing.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And Laura Wadding, who from Deloitte, who I worked with years ago, who's a good friend, she posted something on LinkedIn the other day that said something to the effect of, think about those things that are within your control.
Yeah.
Right? And those things that are outside of your control, don't worry about that. She kind of posted it as being a helpful hint, word of advice for folks that are worried and really caught up on things. Everybody's got a different worry scale, right? And when I first saw that, I'm like, I'm not worrying about those kinds of things yet. But you've got to realize everyone's different, and everybody's stress levels are different. And so just because you think that you're okay and you're managing this fine doesn't mean your team are, right? And you got to think about things that way. A lot of the folks that I've been speaking with over the last couple of weeks have been startup clients, right? And founders. And there's such a wide disparity of things going on right now. And it really, as we talked about before, depends on some of your funding situation. If say a startup has just hit the black a few months ago, but they only have 30 days cash runway, Jesus, you got to adjust pretty quickly. What is your sales model? What's your marketing spend like? Can any of that be reduced? And you got to look right away at your financials, and if you have a good set of financials, if you're using Zero, hopefully, and Expensify and those types of things, just that insight to be able to say, what am I going to do over the next 3 to 6 months so that I can keep this thing alive, right? What are the hard decisions you're going to have to make? And startups are making those hard decisions every day anyway, right? If you are an early stage startup, it's about survival. It's about getting from your seed to your Series A. Right. And if you can just get that far, you should be in good shape. You're turning on revenue, well at that stage. If you are at the stage of, hey, I'm just burning VC cash, I'm perhaps worse off burning friends and family cash. How am I actually gonna survive? Those are some of the questions that people are asking. How do we do this? Keeping that momentum going. One of the funny things, not funny things, but the ironic things about startups is that, people talk about customer empathy. And this isn't just at the startup level. This is at any commercial level where, you want to put yourself into the customer's shoes, but these days you're not going to do it without sanitizing their shoes first, right? And then, feel their pain, but not without some gloves on. But, how do you inspire that buying decision to take place when you're fighting against this, the world is over, do nothing mentality, and adjusting that approach and getting, what is that extra effort that you need to sell? I was looking at a business the other day, just yesterday, that was advertising themselves as software as a service. True SaaS to me means that you go on to their website, you click on log in, you click on sign up, and you can pick that, okay, $99 a month for this software as a service. Now I'm actually going to go with that. Fully online, non-human intervention sales process. Can you get to that, right? Does your product even warrant that? Or are you enterprise sales where you need that extra effort to sell? You need that internal champion to like you just enough to put their neck on the line for you. That's hard. I've spoken with companies as well that were enterprise sales that had the opportunity to shift into, well, I'm going to sell only to developers online as a SaaS model. They did it in 2 weeks, right? And they turned that quickly because they saw this coming, and they knew they had a lot of momentum with their product development cycle, and their product should be out there and people should be buying it. But because they can't reach people through enterprise sales, what's the other way to do it? Right? So it's asking some of those hard questions to say, how do we shift still to keep support of our vision and our strategy to move ahead? I don't envy any founder being in that position right now.
No, it's tricky times, and when you're talking about the SaaS model being kind of fully automated and you click to purchase and all of that kind of stuff, the one thing that's kind of jumping out at me that I've really seen goes back to what we spoke about a little bit earlier around having that connection. And it's almost like people want that connection now where they can talk to someone that little bit more sometimes. I just wonder, will that have kind of an impact on how things are done going forward? Um, like I think about when I was in my brief spell in a large corporate, and it was almost like the human was being taken out of human resources with stuff being offshored and
Yeah.
outsourced to others, and ticketing systems and all that. And anyone who's worked in a large corporate knows about a global HR function where you raise a ticket and you might get a response from someone at some stage. And I was always kind of keen to keep it human resources.
Yep.
And I just think we're really kind of seeing that now, where the things that people really value are kind of contact and connection, and they're really kind of basics. So I wonder, will that have kind of an impact going forward after this?
I think it will. I mean, Lisa White been on Money Never Sleeps before, and Paul, who I know, she talks about bringing your whole self to work,
Yeah,
and this, mentality of just be yourself and don't have your professional self and your personal self, because your boss won't like your personal self, or your boss will see your personal self as
yeah,
unprofessional, or your customers or your colleagues,
yeah,
right? And it's will all of this kind of influence a greater adoption of just be yourself,
yeah.
right? Don't go to work in your pajamas, but at the same time, well, if you're working from home, it doesn't really matter as long as you
Yeah,
look
yeah.
presentable on a video screen, right?
Mm,
But what is it that each person needs? My sister's godfather, Jack, God rest his soul, he started working from home in 1983, and he
mm,
got up every morning and he put on a suit and a tie, not because he was going anywhere, but it just made him feel more professional,
mm.
right? So, do what you got to do, but yeah, finding ways to be yourself.
Yeah. And do you know what's funny about that? Actually, it just reminded me. I think one of the episodes on Money Never Sleeps, you asked me around, what have you learned, or what were your biggest learnings since we started Top Tier? I think it was around Top Tier, and I think what I'd said was something around that it's okay to be yourself,
Yep.
and be authentic, because geez, it's much easier rather than trying to keep two different lives going at the same time and keeping up with everything you've said. It's much easier to just be straightforward and be yourself.
It is, and I think we're on an arc in
Mm,
society where that's coming and that's happening.
yeah, I think so.
It started. I think people have woken up to it, and this corporate chest beating, uniform wearing, testosterone fueled,
Mm,
dare I say, still exists in the White House. But I think overall we're seeing the world trending towards, not that it's being a softer, gentler, it's just more human, right?
yeah,
With the decisions you make and how you carry yourself in business.
yeah,
I find it's more inspiring, it's more insightful as well.
I agree. So, with what you do, what are you seeing outside? Are clients still trying to raise money? Is that even possible at the minute? You talked about it a little bit earlier. Are transformational projects going ahead? Those kind of value-added things, or sometimes seen as value-added things. What sectors are vulnerable? What's going to come out of this even better than it was before?
Yeah, I've been keeping a close eye on all this, obviously, just because I'm getting the questions, hey, am I still going to get funded,
Mm,
right? Is this still going to happen? I think one of the biggest signs coming out of the U.S. just today was their lender, the online lender Cabbage, and I met Catherine Petralia, who's their CEO at MoneyConf in Dublin in 2018, on the same day that I met Greg Chu from QBQ, who's been on Money Never Sleeps and whose business that I advise.
mm,
Both completely inspirational people, Catherine and Greg in their own right, but on completely different ends of the spectrum in how they do that. Anyway, they've stopped lending to small businesses. Cabbage have. And they've been one of my favorite success stories in FinTech because of all the data they're gathering on small business. And this isn't startup level lending. This is mom and pop shops,
mm.
right? This is those businesses in communities that keep people employed, that keep livelihoods going. They've had to pull the plug. And what they're basically saying, well, SoftBank are investing in them, and SoftBank are also pulling the plug on WeWork. I'm not sure if SoftBank can pull the plug on Cabbage or not. But fintech lending to small businesses in the U.S. last year amounted to $10 billion, which is a drop in the ocean in terms of the global economy, but also just to compare it to the U.S. rescue package that is signed off recently, they're pushing $350 billion towards small businesses in the U.S. And that compared to the $10 billion that Cabbage have just managed to, well, not Cabbage, but the entire fintech-led funding market in the U.S. have managed. It's just such a big difference. But Catherine Petralia, and this is from the FT, she said, it's the government's turn, right? Let them step in to do this. And this is just keeping the small business ecosystem going in the U.S. On the VC side, overall, some of the questions that people are asking is who's the money behind the money, right? There's a great podcast called Origins from the guys at Notation Capital in New York. And that's their kind of tagline. We talk about the money behind the money. And it's that question of who are the investors behind the VCs? And startups don't think about that too often, but you do need to research that and find that out if you are a founder seeking VC funding. I put something out on Twitter yesterday that a lot of people, I've been saying a lot recently, and people that it had been impactful. So I just put it out there that imagine the craziest biz dev person that you know. They know their target's breakfast, right? What did their target customer have for breakfast? That's the exact amount of over preparation that you need to do as a founder seeking VC funding. Don't go stalk them outside coffee shops like my friend Jeff Pullen used to do when he was in sales and alternative investment funds way back when. Shout out to Jeff. But you know what? Do your deep dive research. You need to do that. Where are these VCs getting their own funding from? Brian Caulfield, who is in the VC business here in Dublin, he did a blog post on this in the last couple of weeks on why are VCs pulling term sheets. Look at the institutional investors, right? They have investment restrictions. They need to maintain certain allocation percentages to different sectors. Take, for example, and again, this isn't an investment advice, 30% equity, 30% fixed income, 10% liquid cash, and 10% alternatives in a big $100 billion pension fund, right? In that alternative investment pocket at 10%, you got things like private equity and venture capital. Even though the valuations on those aren't as frequently reported, some of those are under pressure right now, obviously, but the equity component's dropped. The fixed income component is dropped. They can't allocate much more to private equity and venture capital right now because those allocations have gone up to 15, 20%, right? So they've got to readjust their equity and fixed income portfolios to get there. So VC's the investors in VCs, investment restriction-wise, may have their hands tied on what they can contribute here. Even if they don't have these allocation percentages maintained and are even more opportunistic, they may just be hoarding cash. So take a family office, right? They're all going to have different risk appetites. They may think, Jesus, I got to go liquid right now, right? Let's not make any more contributions. But as a family office, I've already made a commitment to a venture fund, and I am legally obliged to hand over $1 million next quarter. If I don't, as a family office, hand over that $1 million, what's the VC going to do? Sue me, right? You got to think about those kinds of questions. They may, but generally they want to maintain that investor relationship for the long run, which is going to outlive this short-term, hopefully short-term, fingers crossed, situation that we're in. So the VCs may have their hands tied. Others, Sequoia Capital, and this is from Bloomberg about 2 weeks ago, game on for them. They're raising $7 billion in venture funds to invest in China, India, and the U.S. And I kind of joked with somebody that the China is obviously going to be the first one that comes out of this crisis, and so valuations are going to look pretty good, right? So good for Sequoia to get in there and to fund these, but it's not just China; it's also India and the U.S. that should be investing that $7 billion in. But I think something like at least $1.5 billion of that was for Southeast Asia, right? And you start thinking about this in the context of either within coronavirus or without coronavirus, there's still huge opportunities there to make investments. So I think the bigger players will keep doing that. One of the interesting things was just a deal renegotiation that took place. Prepaid Financial Services did a deal earlier this year with EML payments, or late last year. Prepaid financial services, for those that don't know, are kind of the tech behind a whole bunch of app-only payment services with debit cards. So a lot of the challenger banks use them for their beta product before they can partner up with other providers, because they've got a nice kind of app-only bank in a box. Not really bank in a box, but the card framework in a box. Knock nearly half the price off of the acquisition just through renegotiation because of what's going on with coronavirus. I can't, it's hard to see these types of things happening, but it is real life. Specifically with my network, just 3 examples of talking to VCs in recent days. Some have ramped down, but on those 3 chats, number 1, although this guy thought he might have coronavirus, and he's got a bad cough, he's still got the deal flow tap on. He's being pitched to over Zoom. He's taking deals forward that he likes, bring it into investment committee if they get to that point, or doing his whole big deal memo. They recently closed their funds, so they got to get deploying capital. And there's going to be businesses that will be pretty much BAU regardless of what's going on around the world. Now, obviously, the health of their employees and ability to deliver code is one thing. VC number 2, newborn baby in the house, right? He just started raising fund 2, so he's taking advantage of the downtime, right? And saying, listen, I can ride this out for the next month. I got a 6-week-old in the house, so let's just chill out, right? Now, are there deals that perhaps that VC may have done? Yeah, maybe, but you know what? They're reprioritizing. Number 3, a VC I just talked to yesterday, they have an alternative model that's focused more on the inbound help that they can deliver to startups themselves, rather than the outbound help that they can deliver based upon connectivity with their network. So that's their value add is kind of what they call transformation. They're launching their first fund. They're fully game on. Whatever momentum they had before this all started, they need to keep it alive. So that's kind of the view on VC. But I think in a nutshell, it's going to be different from one to the next. And you got to talk to your, if you had been doing what we call a soft circle, and you had a few investors that were kind of saying, listen, yeah, I'll put in 250, I'll put in 500, whatever. You got to go back to them and see what their situation is. Do not count your chickens before they hatch. Absolutely not. Until that money is in the bank, you should be thinking about contingency plans right now is my strong advice, right? And that is professional advice. On the transformational projects, Paul, that you asked about, looking at the corporate level, I see people being pulled into BAU that normally are the scouts out on the front line of where the business goes next, right? So this big corporate bank that on the other side though, what I'm seeing is that, just through a conversation yesterday, big agenda for transformation that these guys have at the corporate level. Their natural process is to go out and find inspiration and new ideas with, and perhaps real suppliers as well, just through fintech and deep tech. And they're still out there, and they're doing this over Zoom and Teams instead of meeting people or calling them to their office in London, right? And that can lead to some deals for the startups, which is good, and they're going to keep doing that. But a mid-size asset manager I know well, I think the questions they're asking is, how the heck are we going to do anything to improve, rather, above and beyond just keeping business as usual going, right? And where on the best of days that, they got people that may be, giving it their all 10, 12 hours a day, how you actually going to get more out of people right now, right? When they're all scattered and working from home. So, some bigger, well-budgeted transformational projects, I think, will continue. I'm seeing some trends there that are pointing towards that. But I think overall, a lot of people are saying, listen, let's just focus on business as usual. Where I'd have some concerns, those in financial services with fees driven by the value of client assets, right? And we could probably do a whole episode on fund admin, right? And, looking at how they're managing. Are they bank owned? Are they independent? And just hypothesize on who's vulnerable and who's safe. But we got to make sure we don't conflict anybody's client interest as well, right?
Of course. Who do you think is going to come out of this well?
I think those that can sell 100% virtually, or with no human interaction whatsoever. Zoom, obviously, you and I are looking at each other right now over Zoom, and recording this on Zoom.
You're in my bedroom, Pete.
Yes,
first time.
I feel honored and a little bit wary at the same time.
You should.
Yes. Trello, not too many people talk about that publicly, but it's a great collaborative work tool
Trello's
for program
cool,
management, for product development. HubSpot, MailChimp. I just used SurveyMonkey for the first time the other day. Instead of going and having that meeting with somebody as a follow-up closeout, say, how did that really go for you? Well, just send out a survey to everyone involved in the project. It's a little bit scary because you're going to get some honest feedback, but you know what? It can make a big difference. I think, so if you can not necessarily shift your business, but move it to a situation where you know that you can keep your new business channels moving fully virtually, you're going to be in good shape. We talked about Slack before. I initially thought going into this, they would have done really well, but looking at the real life implications of those that are already integrated with Microsoft and how well the Teams has been developed over the last couple of years, I see that as being quite interesting. The couple of other folks out there that are doing things 100% virtually as it is anyway. I think looking at financial market overall, it's how are people with money still to invest? Thinking about how they want to invest and what are the ways for them to do that. And I think that is going to be a trend that is going to change the investment world for the long term, coming out of what people are doing right now. There's just easier ways to move money around. There's easier ways to get insight to your investments. There's easier ways, to set up your nest egg, whatever it's going to be, for rainy days like this. And people are going to be thinking a lot differently about their relationship with money coming out of all this, I think. What do you think? What are you seeing on the hiring front?
There's kind of three different scenarios at the minute. The most common, unfortunately, is that hiring is just frozen, literally stopped. The closest thing to this is 2009. Like 2009 was just a horrendous year in financial services. But an awful lot of places, if I think about the advisory firms in particular, anything on the kind of fund management, well, not anything, but a lot of those already established and maybe domestically focused fund managers, wealth managers, asset managers, all frozen, with the exception of some, certainly on the fund services, fund admin side, frozen again. Not a huge amount happening at all in that space. The second scenario that we're seeing is companies that are happy to interview and to make hiring decisions remotely, but they're delaying start dates. So had an offer made and accepted just the other day, and start date on the contract is TBC. So that person needs to go and train in the UK and come back to Dublin. But still going ahead. Some fintechs are taking a similar approach, but an awful lot of the fintech stuff, certainly in the domestic fintech market, has dried up as well. And the other scenario, I suppose, which is least common but is absolutely happening, is some companies are happy to interview and onboard remotely. Yeah. So we've had a couple of offers recently where they've never been to the client's office. They've done all of their interviews over Slack or Polycom or Teams or whatever it is. They're getting onboarded, and day one now is about onboarding and getting set up from a tech perspective. So all of those lovely issues that everyone who's joined a large corporate before, in terms of getting access to folders and emails and all that kind of stuff provisioned and set up, is still going to happen, but it's all going to be virtual.
Yeah, first day of work in your pajamas.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But it's good to see that there are some companies out there who are still going ahead. And a lot of that within financial services seems to be around, I suppose there's two types of company. One is the Brexit firm that's setting up here, that will still need to set up here, that will still need talent, and will be required to by CBI to get boots on the ground and have substance here, and get all of their DP roles and their PCF roles, etc. established. And then the others are those that would have looked at Ireland as an opportunity to set up, an additional talent hub, and so are still have room in offices to grow, etc. They are going to grow over the next while, and the reality is that sometimes there's an opportunity there to take people who may have been made redundant or may be looking for other reasons because of what's happening at the minute. And the other area that we've seen a bit of a spike in is tech. So things like cybersecurity, things like people who work on getting people set up remotely, all of that kind of stuff is in demand at the minute. On the other side, people looking for jobs, again, it's the same kind of scenario. And we are seeing a little bit of pushback from people who just don't want to move at the minute because if they walk away, they're concerned about, not having the same benefits, the same opportunities. If a redundancy does have to happen, they want to have the same tenure set up. They're walking away from pensions, all of that kind of stuff. No one's walking away from sick pay at the minute for kind of obvious reasons. But the other side of that is people have a little bit more time. If you are at home, you're not in the office. You don't have to scramble into a meeting room to take a phone call from a recruiter or from someone else. You can do your VCs, all of that kind of stuff. So there is kind of opportunity there as well. And I kind of alluded to it earlier on, but there is a certain cohort of people who, as I said, kind of aren't overly happy with how things have been dealt with, specifically around coronavirus. And there's those who are really kind of seeing, I suppose, what leadership are made of in certain organizations and are just not happy with it. And they're starting to look. They may not be the ones that move straight away, but they're absolutely the ones who are going to be sitting there when all this is over in 6 to 12 months' time thinking, Jesus, is this the right place for me? So there is kind of a lot of those conversations happening.
Yeah, like you say, people don't leave companies; they leave bosses.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a real struggle for people. On the coaching side, you mentioned the thing we're doing with the 90-minute complimentary coaching session. That's anyone in an SME, anyone in HR, anyone in a leadership position who could do with that little bit of support or that little bit of thinking time to help. We're delighted to be able to do that. So possible.ie/COVID. Please log on, fill out the form. We're more than happy to help. But outside of that, again, kind of talked about it before, where we're seeing a real interest and real demand in terms of coaching is for companies who are looking for additional support for managers or for leaders who've had to adjust to this new reality very, very quickly. And some are looking for support for those kind of high potential employees as well, in particular. Who they want to be able to retain, who they want to really show that during this time of just unprecedented change, that they are there to support them and they want them there for the long term.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm merely, I am expecting a call from somebody that says, Pete, can you just come in for 6 months after this all subsides or right now, just to help us get through this?
Yeah.
We'll see if that call comes. You'll be the first one to know.
I look forward to it and I hope it does. But I think one of the things that we did talk about, and I've mentioned the thing that we're doing, but there's another I suppose coaching group that I'm associated with, the lady who would have trained me, Alva Harrington, and another one of coaches that she would have worked with closely have set up a thing called Connect to Coach, which is there for any frontline workers who are looking for support, a completely free service. There's 22 coaches already registered, and now there's another cohort going on their website. And I think what a lot of that is kind of driven from is people want to help. People really want to help when there's so much kind of out there going on, as we said already, with frontline staff in hospitals, nursing homes, emergency services, food retailers, public transport staff, all of those guys doing their very best to look after everyone and keep things going. Like, I don't want to look back in 6 to 12 months' time and think, Jesus, I could have done something. Myself and Laura have the training, we have the coaching skill and all of that kind of stuff to be able to support people. So, why not do it? Take advantage of the opportunity that we have a little bit more time when it is a little bit quieter, that we can give that time to people who are having to put in more time than ever and put themselves at more risk than ever. And I think around the kind of connection side that we talked about, like what really brought it home for me is, there's grandparents who can't hug their kids, parents who can't hug their kids anymore. People who are immunocompromised for various different reasons, all having to make really big sacrifices and really adjust how they live. So I don't know. I think for us to be able to give a little bit back, even if it's only a few people who take up the offer, is just a really, really good thing to do.
I wish you could just go around the neighborhood and the more mature folks in the neighborhood just knock on the door and say, hey, do you know how to use FaceTime?
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
or whatever, just so that they can have that connection with their grandkids.
Yeah,
My parents live in the U.S. We got a family Zoom scheduled for 5 p.m.
yeah.
On Saturday. Not that any hackers will come into that, but got to keep those things going. My
Yeah,
parents have been
yeah.
out, they're in their 70s. They've been outside the house for an hour a day. It's almost like you're in, federal lockdown,
Yeah,
right?
same.
And that, my dad luckily went out before all this, and he bought a rowing machine and a spinning bike, right? So, they get to keep things
Yeah,
moving and
yeah.
to stay healthy, but you need that human interaction, and it's not just, it's
Yeah.
everybody, right? So no matter where you are.
Any final things? One thing I was thinking about before I came down to go on to Zoom was any book recommendations for times in a crisis. I know one that I read recently, and it's strange these things seem to pop up for a reason for me recently, is I don't know if you've heard of a book called The Choice. It's
No.
not business related at all. Edith Eiger. So she was a Holocaust survivor, went through Auschwitz and all of that horrible stuff. But the book is all around, how do you reframe what you're going through to survive or to get through it or to come out the other side of a significant challenge like this. Really good book for
Yeah,
something like
great
this.
book I just read. And I talk about Ben Horowitz frequently enough. His new book, What You Do Is Who You Are, right? Which is the culture of the leader. And he uses historical examples of slave revolt. He uses a few different ones as well to say, listen, here were the great leaders in time, Genghis Khan even, right? And how he actually built his whole followership, even though he was a complete barbarian, right? It was just the approach that he took to adopt and embrace each, basically society that he took over, right? And how he brought it all together and integrated things. Probably a terrible example, but the book itself really just says, if you are in a leadership position, you got to walk the walk and talk the talk. If you do things, if you say something, and then you go act against that, people just are going to lose faith in you. So especially during the hard times like right now, you absolutely got to be mindful of that and watch your step. Be yourself as long as you're, and that's a big thing that we talked about. As long as you're kind of true to yourself as a leader in any business, and you open up and you have that personal approach to things, the actions that you take will be fueled by coming from the right place.
Yeah.
So so it's called the What You Do Is Who You Are. It's Ben Horowitz. I just finished reading that a couple of weeks ago, and it was inspiring and it was helpful.
Great. Pete, good to talk to you as always.
Definitely. Really
Stay
enjoyed
safe.
this. You too, Paul. Thanks a million.
Cheers.
Money never sleeps, pal.
That does it for this week, folks, and thanks to Paul Smyth for coming up with the idea for this episode. Links and show notes for this episode are on moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online. Remember, if you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with the team at Top Tier Recruitment, as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for editing this podcast. As for me, I increase the odds of startup success. Get in touch through the contact page on noriaventures.com, and you can check out what Owen Fitzgerald is up to these days on Twitter at OwenFitzgerald9. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.